your mind, lost in of mine. He is from a rural town in Georgia. And he's just been on a whole like spiritual awakening version, like journey and version, like with his own Christianity. And he knows I'm Jewish, and he just loves asking me questions and stuff, and he's like, what's your take on like, Jesus, from like the Jewish aspect of it, and like the way he does it is be like, yo, why did the Jews put that man on the cross? Why did they crucify him? I'm dying. It's true.
Answer for them, Dave. Answer for them right now. Let us know why the Jews did that.
Well, so the Jewish side of it was about 2,500 years ago, was around towards the end of the Second Temple. And from what we have written from our scholars and our teachers, the Jews at the time were extremely corrupt, very money driven. There was a lot of animosity between people within the land at the time. And they were already run by the Romans. So anything that would piss off the Romans, they were scared shitless. But the hilarious thing was, like, not that many years later, the Romans just destroyed the city and took them all to Rome and put them in the gladiator games and all that fun stuff. So
yeah, and like even 200? No, it was 200 years before. That's when Constantine was like, yeah, only Christianity. And then the guy 2 emperors later was like, against the law if you're anything but.
Yeah, it's bananas.
And then you've got this diaspora of people that are doing Jesus and bongs. There is no limitation to this.
There isn't.
But then you have the diaspora of people like speaking Greek, and they're like learning this new gospel, and they're like referencing the Hebrew Old Testament, but that's now been translated as the Septuagint. And then you've got the OG Hebrew speakers, and they're like, what is this New Testament in a language we don't know? And that's where you get the split.
Yeah.
It's not a war. It's like life happened.
No. There's a lot of similarities between both sides. On the Jewish aspect of things, a lot of what we believe is Jesus, or Yeshu in Hebrew. He was the founder of what we know as modern orthodoxy in regards to monotheistic religions. And modern orthodoxy in the aspect of growing within the times. The idea of showing love, passion, and kindness as we progress as people. As like technology has changed. So like now we have like social media, so people are able to use that to connect with others and help communities and things of that. It's interesting because, for a lot of people, you don't have these conversations where, you sit down with a Muslim, you sit down with a Christian, and you just hash things out. I don't even think that's the right term, but
we duke it out. I agree. And I think that's why I started my podcast. Oh, gosh, it's so cringy, because I was talking about God in such like casual ways with my sister, because like we're both Christian, and I would call her and I'm like, this was my day. Jesus is popping off. I can't believe he's putting me through this. And I was like, wait, like, this is awesome that we can talk about our creator. It, like, just acknowledging that he's there, acknowledging his movements, acknowledging his presence. And I feel like more people would talk about him if like just this conversation was more commonplace. And so the channel was like, A, getting answers from scholars, but B, like, how often can we talk about Jesus in a well-informed way, like well-guided by scholars and what I've learned and people's stories, without it being like at a church service? Because I think like we give attention to the things we give attention to. So if we just start giving attention to Jesus, then like it just becomes a topic that people care about talking about and contributing towards more.
I think also there's too much focus on the written text.
Yes.
People gotta remember this was written thousands and thousands of years ago. Okay? And these people, as brilliant as they were bored as fuck. I mean, as bored as you can get. And they had influence, they congregated with one another. They had fertility rituals, and they did all sorts of different things like psychedelics and among others. And over time, this progression of being able to find a higher power and find that connection grew. That is what faith and religion stems from. It stems from people finding common grounds to connect with one another, what this vast world is. And there's a lot of interpretations, but like, again, you're taking something from people thousands of years ago. That's like the first thing you got to keep in your brain when you're jumping into this. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think we like truly cannot contextualize in a modern sense, like the way that we're referencing like Jesus. Thousands of years ago, this guy did this in a robe and he did all these miracles. At the time of Jesus, these people that were like creating this religion, these people that were very bored, they were referencing Moses, who was thousands of years before them. So for them, they're doing the same thing we're doing today and like living out these miracles and like writing the New Testament. And by no means do I think we're like writing another New Testament, but it's like even them back then were referencing like, man, it was crazy back during the Exodus. Can you believe that with Baal and like the fire coming down? And like that was Jesus talking about that. That's like him quoting Old Testament and like quoting all Torah. And now we're talking about Jesus's time and quoting gospel. So it really is like there's no difference here. Like they are experiencing like a very spiritual experience on this earth that they think is happening so far ago the same way we are. Like we're there's really no difference other than like an advancement in technology. But I feel like when you maybe are closer to like some of the miracles, like maybe Jesus looking back at Moses, like Old Testament lore is wild. And I think like we're so distant from it that we're like, most of it's mythological, that like most of it can't happen. It has to be fake. I don't know. Like me, I used to think that way. Now talking to scholars, I'm like, if you were going to buy into the bit that Jesus died and then rose on the third day, you got to buy into the bit that there was a global flood. You got to buy into the bit that Earth was created in 7 days. Like all of it is crazy. I'm not saying it's
Well,
normal, but you got to buy
the
into it.
so to your point though, like the idea of 7 days, we're not necessarily saying that it's seven Earth days. A lot of people believe, and a lot of scholars believe too, that it's talking about 7 cycles. So 7 days worth of cycles. So the day could be a billion years, it could be a million years, it could be 100 billion years. But the problem is like immediately like people have the interpretation of like, oh, that's what it says. Well, this is what we do. So immediately like that's what it means. You know, not even the story of like the 7 days. You want to talk about like, for example, Exodus, where we're kind of coming closer to Passover. There was scientists that kind of was able to prove a lot of like the plagues that happened. Like how did wild animals get out? The Egyptians used to collect exotic wild animals. If they got into a fight and there's no tamers taking care of the animals and they got loose, wouldn't they run around and go on a killing spree?
Wait, what are you talking about? You've lost me.
No, so there are like again scientific aspects to what these people were talking about thousands of years ago. When they talk about like the 7 days, we now know like within science and many other things that there are cycles. There's been cycles for how this planet was formed. The same idea like how is it possible like it's a myth. How do you have 12 plagues like that in Egypt? Well, there are ways of proving that to be real things. Like I
Yeah.
mentioned, like the thing with the wild animals, one of the 12 plagues running
Oh, I
rampant.
see. I see now. Yeah.
Like
It
it can't
true,
happen.
but it's
Yeah.
inexhaustible. Like what you're talking about is old Earth theory. So you're right. I have gone down that rabbit hole. I've interviewed Dr. Hugh Ross. He's an old Earth theorist, whatever, he believes that. And he's like, yeah, every day represents an epoch of time. And that's how we can include evolution, and that's how we can include all these things. There's also the younger theorists that say the Hebrew word used for day is a 24-hour period. And so when we reference the time, it was 7 days that were 24 hours. Looking back at translations, when they were saying the ages of people, were they saying 950 years, but it's actually 950 months? Like, who knows? At the end of the day, you're right. I think that science does echo a lot of the findings. Similar to the people that I've interviewed on like the flood. Some people are like, it was a local flood. There's so many other like lores that reference the flood. It doesn't really matter, but we need to like recognize God in it. Whereas like other people I've talked to was like, absolutely was a global flood based on the fossil record, based on the carbon dating. This is exactly the trauma that you see with the sedimentation and like how quickly it formed. Like I just had a guy on who's a paleontologist that talked about this, but like those two schools of thought, I'm not telling you which one's right or wrong. I'm just saying, like, how cool is it that like both have very deep rabbit holes and that like we get to explore both?
Yeah, it's again going back to understanding who these people were, because when you have history like we do have, it was saved. There's a lot of artifacts that we don't have that have just washed away. We have artifacts such as like written text, which for a very long part, like even with the Jews, part of the tribes for a long time was just verbal. There was nothing that was written down. It's just everybody
Total,
talking.
totally oral.
And that switch of making sure it was written down, they wanted it to be written down so it'd be saved for thousands of years.
Yeah.
I'm 100% positive. Like I understand we can't talk to them, but I'm 100% positive we were able to talk to people 3,000 years ago and ask, why are you writing this down? I guarantee you they would tell you the reason they're writing this down is we want people to remember this from thousands of years going on.
Right.
Guaranteed.
Should we be writing stuff down right now? Do you think? Like
We
what needs
do.
to be well, like we write everything down, but like what specifically should we be focusing on today that people 2,000 years from now need to remember?
I know this is going to sound a little like sadistic or maybe a little bit harsh, but I don't think many people are going to remember this time.
I
Like
think it'll blur together. Yeah.
the same way, like the 13 and the 12s and 1300s. Like, do we really know that much about the 12 and 1300s? Like 14 and 1500s, a
Big
little
big
more.
time.
Like, yeah, big time. 12, 1300.
Dave, I am not somebody that you should ask about historical lore, but
No,
I'm
no,
gonna tell
no,
you
not at
something
all.
right
I'm
now.
just
No,
having
I'm gonna
fun.
tell you
I'm having fun right
when
now.
when was the
I love
Black
this.
Plague? I don't know. When was the Renaissance? I don't know. When was the Enlightenment? I feel like not in the 1200s.
You see what I'm getting at? Like, there are periods of history that stand out more than any other ones,
Yeah.
But there's just points in history that just, I think the reason why 2,500 years ago stands out more than ever is because it was a cultural shift in the way that people think. People were able to stand up for themselves for the first time. Like, remember, like, back then there were empires, there was kings, there was rulers. You stood up against the king.
Yeah. But like we had that, like all the guillotine stuff too,
Yeah.
right? So
But you can see, like, whenever there's like a rebellion of freedom, whenever there's like a rebellion of we want to speak out the truth,
mm,
that has been what has stood the testament of time the
I
longest.
totally agree with you. And I feel like someone on like a different podcast brought this up. They're like, Gen Z, their whole thing is truth. Like they're the generation of authenticity and like leading with truth and only doing the things that they believe in and being vulnerable and talking about mental illness and all the things. And it's like kind of like what you said of like, so if everything is truth for this next generation, what's going to be left? Secrets? We need to bring secrets back. We need to bring discretion back. That's the next generation of like, we know too much. Put it back in.
I think also, I remember I was talking with this with somebody before. This idea always pops up, which is where we live in the matrix. We live in a virtual reality. And even if that may be true, even if the universe is made out of, ones and zeros or single cell organisms and different things coming together, you still need something behind that to have it operating,
Like
you
intention,
know?
you mean?
Yeah, because for example, like I'm talking to on a computer right now. Okay, I have
Yeah.
a screen, but behind the screen, there's a motherboard, there's a logic board, there's a CPU, there's a GPU, there's a lot of
Okay,
different
Neo.
components.
Baba.
There's a lot of components that make the computer work besides of what we see. So this idea of like, well, there's nothing. Even with the whole virtual reality idea, I'm just like, I don't 100% agree with you. I'm like, there's gotta be something maybe some things, maybe something we don't understand, whether that may be God, whatever you want to call it. But I feel like there is definitely something behind the curtain that we're just not aware of. We're just not.
Yeah, I mean, we're not like we have a soul. We have a spirit. Like if we're just existing within like what we can see and what exists in front of us, even if it is like a one and a zero, like there's a soul behind that that we are led through our values. Like we are led through our conscience. We are led through our like desires and our purpose. That's what's behind the curtain. So what put that there? Because that wasn't coded in. That was very intentional and unique to each one of us.
Yeah, to your point, it's like if you've ever unfortunately dealt with the loss of a family member or somebody that you love, and you're by their side on their deathbed, or I know some people do like embalming, and you do a wake, you don't feel anything. You see them,
Ye-
you don't feel anything. They're not there.
Yeah,
Like your mind immediately connect, like they're gone. Like there's no soul, there's no connection, there's no nothing. It's just a body.
you're talking from personal experience.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that.
Hopefully you should not experience that for a very long time. But
Yeah.
when you when you do, you realize that the world that we live in is a lot bigger than you. That it's not just a switch that goes on and off. People like to say like, "Oh, you're born and then you die." How do you know that it's we're born and we die? How do you not know it's a cycle? How do you not know that it's maybe something bigger than that? How do you not know that maybe your soul is watching you go through your entire life while your physical body is experiencing that? There's, what do you get where I'm coming from? That's like there's so many different aspects of where this can go that to be like, "Ah, I'm gonna be dead at 80." Wow, buzzkill. Like,
I
why are
also
you so
say like,
gloom?
well, yeah, there's a couple like perspectives here. One can be you focus on yourself of like, well, what's my purpose? Is there even a purpose? Do I just choose and then I die? What if we zoom out and it's like there's good in this world? Genuinely, we've seen it. And then there's evil. Who's controlling those currents? Like where does evil come from? Where does good come from? Like zoom out to that and like what's navigating that in the sphere? And I think that also points towards something beyond us. There's something invisible going on because I think there's just something bigger than karmic cycles and the retribution principle. Like there is a north, what is it? I want to say like North Compass, North Pole in like our moral standard that like every religion points to. And like as a Christian woman, like I think it's all copycats of like the one living word, but like regardless of which one you're pointing, whichever book you're reading, the Quran, the Torah, the Bible, there's all a North Star. And so what's the evil force that's opposing that? Because there is one. You can't say that like we just exist and we all have morals despite our religious beliefs. Then what's the enemy? Because you cannot have light without darkness. Like that's just a logical belief. I'm not like trying to quote Bible here. Like we all know that.
Without darkness, there is no light. Well, I mean, it literally says it. I want to bring up the Bible again. It literally says in the very first verse
So
in
what is the
Genesis.
darkness? If you're going to go on this like agnostic thought process, like you've got to have a definition for darkness.
I think what darkness is the absence of nothing. And I think what we think of nothing is completely not true. We cannot
What?
fathom anything that does not have a physical being or form or structure of time. It's
Wouldn't
like
the
anything.
absence of nothing be something?
Yes,
So that would be
that's
darkness, you're saying? Why would that be darkness?
because when you look at the world, right? We're talking about there's a lot of good in the world, but also there's a lot of bad at the same time. One thing you realize there's almost a balance. It's like whenever you have good things that happen, you need that to be balanced out with darkness or bad, whatever you want to call it. Like there's always been this balance throughout time. And it's like almost as if one needs to survive over the other. Light is something we can physically see. Obviously, I mean, you could freaking go outside right now and it's like point at the sky. It's like that's light, that's the sun, you know. But darkness is something that we're terrified of. We can't really see it through in darkness. Think about it. A lot of other creatures can see at night. We can't. We have this constant fear. I think it's because there is that balance from the very beginning of good and evil. It's not that they're fighting against each other, they balance each other out, literally like a scale, like one goes like, eh,
Oh,
one goes,
absolutely.
yeah.
They need each other, but their goals are different.
They are, but they work hand in hand with one another.
Yeah.
And I and,
Yeah.
and that may sound like, what do you mean? Like, there are times that some evil people do tremendously good things.
I was just
And
about to
even,
say you are kind of preaching right now because like you're
yeah.
kind of explaining the not the problem of suffering, but like the solution of why we have suffering because it goes hand in hand with the good.
Mhm.
And like I feel like a lot of the Bible that I've been reading recently has been like humble yourself, like sit back down. Like why is bad things happening? Not really like do you I would love to explain it to you. How much time do you have? Like I feel like that's what God says. If we're like why do bad things happen? Like that's like all of Job. Like Job is wild. But he gets to the end where he's like, why are these bad things happening to me? I think it's like chapter 38 or 39. And God's like, oh, were you there when I marked off the dimensions of the earth? Like, you let me know how does do work. And like, Job just sat back down. But it's like, we don't get to know because we cannot fathom how that evil is going to work hand in hand with good. That's why evil exists because it works hand in hand with good. I think you explained it perfectly.
We don't like to hear the truth. And what we always need answers to our questions. That is the number one. And one of the hardest lessons you sometimes have to learn is you go through certain circumstances and you're like, what the fuck? And then you realize down the road, you're like, oh, that actually worked out in my favor because that happened. Now I'm
Yep.
here.
Yep.
You know, the whole plan, like you may say, like, oh, that was planned out for you. I don't think so. I think it's you have hundreds of options in front of you, and you decide to walk through this option.
Dog, I cannot believe you're saying this right now. Keep going. Keep going.
So you made the decision out of those hundred of options that were put in front of you. So you have your own free will and free choice, but those perceived notions of where you're going to end up is already planned. Those are all already planned, but you have to choose. You have to make the choice of which one you're going to choose.
You know, you are touching on such a big religious debate that I just found out about. So that's so wild that I mean, unless you know about the open theistic versus Calvinistic debate. No? Yes?
Um, I got this theory actually from I'm OTD, so I originally grew up in a religious Jewish religious cult community. So when we leave, we're called off the derech, so it stands for OTD,
Got it.
and he went on like extreme, like he traveled places and did all of his history, and like he kind of talked to me a lot about this stuff. So this is where I get a lot of this stuff too. He like did an in-depth
Ooh.
of the Bible, the Quran. Somebody I knew in New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so did they discuss open theism and Calvinism with you?
I don't remember, but I think that's where he was getting all of this from. So
Okay, so
I'm
you're
familiar with the
already
idea.
like
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
Calvinism is like there's a plan, and that's how I used to believe because that's what I was taught in church of like they like God knows what I'm going to eat for breakfast next Tuesday because my life has been planned. And like me going through that hard thing last year has was needed to get me to this good thing this year. That concept of a plan and it's being pre-planned and predestination, that's all like a Calvinist traditional view of like how the world works. But then it kind of comes into play like, well, then where does free will if God already knows our decisions? And what you said of like there are options, they're kind of like that multiverse. There are infinite options that I can choose in the next moment. That is my free will. But where the creator comes into play is that he has an infinite mind and an infinite capacity to understand how each one of my unfathomable amount of options. He knows how each one could play out, and I get to choose which one I go forward with. And that's this open theistic view. So it kind of goes hand in hand with like a creator that is still omnipotent and omniscient versus like a human that still has free will and is not like preordained by a god. That's so insane that you're talking about that.
Yeah. And it can also be applied to even with evolution, because all evolution is a creature or being that decides that it wants to evolve itself, become better than itself. You know, you can see the level of avenues of where if you have a creator, you have a god, you have, a higher power where has the ability to make these choices, allows for every living thing, every organic thing to be able to evolve based on their environment. I mean, think about animals that live here in this country. Okay. You go from the state of Washington down to the state of Florida. The animals living in Washington had to evolve to that climate. They had to deal with and those choices of living out there and surviving. Whereas whatever those creatures are living down in Florida. So all of these things kind of go hand in hand. It's like every living thing is doing pretty much what we're doing on a different scale. It's crazy.
I've been evolving so much since I got to Hawaii. I don't know about you. I don't know where you live. Where do you live?
Florida. I live
Okay.
in paradise.
We are warm-blooded creatures, you and I, Dave. I used to live in Ohio, and like that is cold 100% of the time. And then I
All the
moved to
time.
Hawaii
Is
two
it
years
true that
ago.
they have four seasons? Not the hotels, but like the four
No,
season
they have
anomaly.
Marriott's. I wish they had four seasons.
No, but I heard like there's a thing in Ohio where you can drive and it's raining, and then drive and it's snowing, and then drive and it's sunny outside. Like
You
very
find a
short.
sunny day in Ohio, okay? Good luck. Like, no, it's just overcast, humid, sleet, snow, rain. Like, the place is so sad.
Oh,
It's so
wow.
sad.
I thought it was more exciting than that, and you just like it just went from like what to like yeah.
You know where you actually can experience, I'm going to nerd out on this, 12 of the world's 13 climates is the Big Island. You can drive around the entire island for 6 hours and you'll see so many different climates. It's crazy. You'll see like
Really crazy.
temperate, you'll see arid, you'll see tropical, like you'll see desert, like it's crazy. But yeah, I've evolved. Like I used to survive in Ohio. I remember going to bed in Ohio being like, I might not make it through the night. It's so cold. Like in my house with heat on. Like I'm not built for it. Now I'm in Hawaii, and I go back to visit my family in LA sometimes. And it's like 60 degrees there, perfect California coast weather. It can't. That is way too damn cold for me. Way too cold. I have evolved to now only survive above 75. Anything below, it's life threatening.
I know. I am planning on moving out to Texas the end of the year once I finish school. And I had
Nice.
people like, Texas is hot. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm okay with that. They're like, but it's like real hot. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. It's I think every single person is built differently depending on their environments, but I feel like the thing that gets lost the most is it's not that the congregation is on their path in life and finding God, whatever creator, whatever you want to call it. It's you. I think the thing that gets mistranslated so much is that it's not referring to all of y'all. It's referring to each and every one of you individually.
Mm.
The idea is that, like, you make your own religion and your own faith. And, like, people are like, oh, that's blasphemy. That's not blasphemy. Like, how do you expect two people to read the same book and get the exact same interpretation and follow it exactly the same ways? I'm sorry. I don't know any people that are built that they can follow and do exactly the same thing as the person sitting right next to them. Name me one person. I don't know anybody. I
I
don't know
totally
anybody
agree
like
with
that.
you. I think that like what makes one religion from another is like the foundational beliefs. But when you buy into and agree with like the Christian foundational beliefs, even within that. Like you've got like different religions that you choose to fall into. But let's say you choose Christianity and you're like, okay, I'm going to buy into like the core principle, which is like Jesus. Like that's like step number one. But even once you do that, you're still going to do it differently. Like I had a really great conversation with a Catholic guy, Connor McLaughlin on Instagram. And we were on live and
Wow,
he's
that is such a Irish Catholic. I'm just seeing Irish. I'm sorry, keep going.
awesome guy, knows his stuff, and like anything about the Catholics, like I guess I'm Protestant. I was raised Russian Orthodox. Like I'm just learning about Jesus. So like
Oh,
I
you were
guess I
raised Orthodox?
yeah, girl, we can get
Oh
to that.
wow.
We can get
Oh
to that. I
wow.
heard you
Okay.
mention that. But even like in that conversation, I'm like, dude, what is the difference between us? Like I don't know. I'm so ignorant to the like the Catholic religion. I dated a Catholic and we just went to church a lot. But like and then you had the Eucharist, which like I also have the community. So like what's the difference? And so we're talking and we basically said what you just said of like when you buy into, let's say, working out, okay, you might be a yoga guy. And so when you do yoga, there are things you need to do. We are both
Right
working
here.
out, but you
Right
are
here.
yoga. And you
I
got to know
love
your
yoga.
shavasana. You got to know, the base. You got to keep your
Cat. You gotta know
wrists
cat or dog pose.
wrists under shoulders, baby, or
Mm-hmm.
else you're going to hyperextend. That is how you do yoga. And that is how you've chosen to do the activity of working out. You're going to worship Christ, but you're going to do it in the Catholic way. Let's just say that. I'm going to do it weightlifting. Weightlifting takes form. It's going to have a progression. There's a certain way that you succeed when you weightlift. The same way I might be Protestant. And if I want to succeed in my Christian faith in the Protestant way, there are certain ways. Like we're going to all be based in this book right here. But like you're going to do it doing Shavasana and like cat cows, and I'm going to do it with like powerlifting and cleans. But we're both in this book.
Yeah. I if you want to touch on it, it's really bizarre because when you look at the on the Jewish aspect of it pertaining to the Old Testament, what I have realized being outside of the community for like about 7 years, Jews are not a religion. They're a
Oh,
tribe. They're an ethnicity.
oh,
We come from 12 members of Jacob, had 12 kids. We descend from those. So the religion is an added aspect to the ethnic group.
that's a really
It's a
good point.
part of the ethnic. It's kind of like Ethiopians with their Christianity. They have a very old form, very old sect of Christianity. It's very unique to Ethiopia and their country. And what has basically happened is where there's been an indoctrination that has taken place over the past 100 years, where they have taken influences of Christianity, specifically Catholicism, and implemented that into Judaism. They have re-eradicated and reconstructed the way that it's being practiced to the point where there are suicides. There are members of the community that are
In the
sh-
Ethiopian Orthodox
no,
beliefs?
I'm talking about the Jewish community that I grew up in
Oh,
New
okay.
York. I
Got it.
gave you the example, like, because you were talking about also, like, I want you to touch on this too. When you're dealing like with Orthodoxy or Coptic Orthodoxy or sex, like for example in Ethiopia, like these are different versions of Christianity. Like this is not your stereotypical like Baptist or Protestant or
Because you're
Catholic.
looking
Is
at different books.
yes,
You're
yeah.
basing it, it's like Christian, like I'm based in this book, but Ethiopian Orthodox is including a lot of non-canonical books. The same way Judaism is
Book
more
of Enoch,
like,
for example. Yeah.
yeah, Jubilees. So they're pulling from way more things that they're incorporating into their religion. And like with Judaism, it's just Torah and maybe the Talmud. I don't actually like, I don't know anything about the Talmud. I don't even want
So
to talk about it
no,
like that.
So that's what I was touching on before in regards to the Orthodox Jewish community as it stands. You're correct. They have added on other pieces, like I mentioned. There's been indoctrination within Christian ideas, particularly from Catholicism. Again, this is not discussed openly. They just do
Yeah.
this, and it's just a
Yeah.
part of.
Because
There's
people don't
the
know the history, so they can't even like
correct,
acknowledge it. Like the
correct.
way that like like Judaism to Christianity, like history that we look back, it's like life happened, and so the way that like your books just ended up as your books, the same way my book is just this book with all of the books that were approved, and like when we understand history, it's like oh, it's like it's the same way like just our lives play out. It's not this like dramatic battle of like your books versus mine. It's just like what your people chose and what my people chose. And it's like an element of everything: location, language, who's in charge, what are the priorities of the people in charge. Like, I was talking to somebody about timelines, and they're like, yeah, like Egyptian beliefs. I'm like, yeah, like Egyptians, like the longest like civilization, they lasted forever, right? And he's like,
9,000 years.
so that's what we're believed. This guy was like, yeah, because the way that they list the pharaohs is sequential. So like this guy lived for 100 years, next guy 100 years. Most of these people lived at the same time. So if we overlap their timelines, it's probably more like 2000 years. And that, why did they do that? Because like, why do we believe it? Because we read it in books, because it's written down. Why would we deny that? But at that time when they were writing it down, there were political agendas at play of let's write out certain pharaohs because they don't agree with our ideologies. Let's extend the Egyptian timelines so we look like we've been reigning forever when we look more powerful. Like, life is all about power, control, agendas, identities. And when you're in it, you don't understand that it's all happening. But then you look back and you're like, whoa, you guys follow different books than us. And whoa, look how crazy that civil. Like, there are so many things at play that if you don't understand the history, it kind of doesn't make sense. But when you do, you're like, oh, yeah.
It also shows the modern twist of how things have progressed. I mean, again, what I was trying to point out earlier is the monotheistic religions that we speak of, they have shaped and molded so differently than they were in the past. Now they shape and mold according to society. If all of a sudden, people's agendas start changing, well, here we go again. We're going to start changing now.
Yes.
And it's just bizarro, like pure bizarro world at its finest. And I mean, for me as like a spectator, like sitting outside of this, like I'm not religious, but I'm like the type of person, like I respect religion. I respect religious people. Like I'm more than happy to like have conversations and things. But the thing that I draw the line is when people say, well, this is the way that it's done, and this is the direction of how the people don't talk to me like that. It's like I'm an individual. Don't like speak to me like we the people. There's no we the people here.
True.
It's just me and you
True.
talking. So
True. Ugh. So refreshing to hear. Like, from someone who is associated with the people. I am on my own. Girl, I'm on your side. I
I know.
interview scholars on my own journey to understand Christ. And I go, we might as well record these conversations. Because if I got these questions, someone else does. I record my conversations. I get my answers in the way that I need them. I post them. You wouldn't believe how many people comment telling me I'm wrong. I'm like, listen, dog, I was just doing you a favor by like letting you, like leaving the door open for you. And this is what now I believe. We can discuss it, but you can't come over here and tell me I'm wrong. The same way I'm not telling you you're wrong. Like you said, we're on our own journey. And
We
I can
are.
support what I believe, as you should be able to support what you believe.
it's it's strange because you can go two directions. You can either be somebody that's very bitter, or you can be somebody that opens yourself up, because we are being told about our past a lot of the times is just words of fiction. There's a lot of pieces that are missing. And there's a lot of the times a deeper element to it. You know, we were talking earlier about texts that were written thousands of years ago. For example, like with the Talmud, it was written in Aramaic. Most people don't speak Aramaic, but guess what? It's still being taught in Aramaic. So there are elements of pieces still holding on. And it's holding on because that is its true value. When you have people that are passionate about, for example, Greek history and mythology, they're reading this stuff in Greek. Okay? They're seeing the history for what it is and not what it isn't. Like the same way you're talking about with the book, it's like you're reading it the way it was supposed to be written, not the way that you're supposed to interpret it. You're reading it, that's just how it was written. So you can take your own interpretation no matter direction, what have you. You
Yeah.
know, it's oh my god, I it's frustrating. It's it's frustrating because like I have a religious family, and like being non-religious and also being gay and like losing most of your family and then taking 7 years from like everybody to turn around, it's just bizarre. It's just bizarre. It's like you read where be kind to your neighbors, be good to your fellow man and woman, and you don't even practice the same values with your own family.
Yeah. Yeah, the hypocrisy is wild. And it gives us a bad rap. Like I feel like if people were to approach everything with way more humility, which like I feel like God put my podcast on my heart and like it's too good of an idea because why the hell would I like start a podcast admitting that I'm an idiot? But that's the whole point of it is to be like, I don't get it. And I like gave my life to Christ, but I don't get it. So I'm just getting answers. But like truly all God calls us to do is know God and love others. Where did this judgment come in? Where did this pointing fingers come in? Like in the realm of possibilities, choose love. And I hate how corny that is, but like it really is the best way forward because it overshadows ignorance. It overshadows this like pain that you can cause.
It's it's a type of pain that's yearning. It's a type of pain that like echoes in. I remember when I lost my dad, the one thing that I kept thinking about was like, wow, what am I going to do now? You know? And it's really strange because you start to realize like even why deaths happen in your life. It's where almost the person's not supposed to be in your life at that point. And whether it may be painful or hard, there are reasons why. You know, there's reasons why like you pop into somebody's life and you're only there for a short period. That is sometimes the most painful thing. You know, you say like, you know, supposed to be merciful, right? But those situations happen because those choices that you make, they have consequences. Going back to like we were talking about like how there's a balance between good and evil. Every time you make a choice, you sacrifice something in return. I remember this is kind of going like into the deeper lore, like within the Zohar, when it talks
Really?
about the angel of death. The angel of death gives a person a choice, and in the response to that choice, they have to go, regardless of which decision that they make. Why is this? It's because those both decisions you made led for the angel to meet you. So it's almost like a double-edged sword, but again, like that is the idea of that free will is where you have control of your own life. You have control of your own choices. But the deeper level to that is to the choice of your own choices, there are those sacrifices and
Yeah.
consequences.
Yeah. How do you think that like people are suffering the most right now by not acknowledging those consequences? By like just acknowledging the positive side of their free will and what they can do versus what they're saying no to or what they're potentially saying yes to in the future because of what they're saying yes to today. Like I feel like it's like pop culture for sure. I feel like it's like lack of self responsibility, lack of self growth. Like I think it's like what you choose to prioritize and like in my words like idolize, like what comes first and forefront, like for the cost of success and all the time and energy you spend on this project or whatever work or whatever relationship, like there will be something else that is not getting fed and like that animal will attack in the future.
It's a hard thing to face because you you have to be you have to be strong because you could say that like the sacrifice, people can go out and drink, and have a great time and get fucking shit faced, and like bang their head and end up in the ER. Like that's definitely a consequence. But there are other types of consequences. You put yourself in a situation where you have a relationship with a best friend or a partner that is literally destroying your life and you're miserable. But you're sticking around because you have some great things that are going along. You're choosing that path to be with that person and you're getting some benefit, but there's that consequence that comes with those actions that you're taking. So I think like we know the path and then we can understand the consequences and then we can decide if we want to accept or not. And sometimes you don't have that option, but they're there regardless.
Yeah, I was like listening to some sort of call. I don't know, like a coaching call. And it was like every decision we make is based on two factors: how much pleasure does it bring and how much pain does it cause? And that's it. Those are the only two things evaluated when we make decisions.
Yeah. I know. For complex creatures, we have very simple problem solving skills.
And I think it was like Brene Brown, and she's like, there's only two emotions that we feel: safe and not safe. And I feel like if you really simplify it, like, do I want to do this? Well, I should. Do I want to? I could. It's like, do you feel safe or no? Is this
Yeah.
bringing? Oh, there goes my light. Is this a visual podcast?
Yeah, that is. It's okay.
My
It's
good
okay.
lighting's gone. Open my
Oh.
window. Like,
Oh.
how easy does life get when you're like, does this make me feel safe or unsafe? Like, does this relationship that I'm pouring into because there's a couple good things that I like, am I safe or not safe? Is this pleasurable or painful? Which, like, does the pleasure outweigh the pain? Like, we don't need to overthink it.
That's why, like, having the idea of this overlord that's always hovering above you, watching every little move that you're doing, is kind of scary. It's like great way to scare the living shit out of your community. You know,
Oh, interesting. I don't feel fear by being watched. I feel fear
but
by
you
being
get what I'm.
subject to something so powerful.
Yeah, but like
Like,
you get what I'm saying. Like the eye always watching over you, like making sure you don't do anything bad.
I
Make sure
don't
you're good.
know. I think that's an old school way of thinking about religion, which,
Right?
like, I
Yeah.
used to think that way. And I think that's people think that because that's how it's taught. I don't think that that's like an ignorant way to think. I think it took me a lot of like conversations to be like, God is watching everything you do to make sure you don't mess up. That's what we're taught. That's Sunday school. But then you kind of like get out of that. It's like, there's no chance that I don't mess up. There's no chance. Like, the one guarantee and like one promise I can keep to God is that I will mess up. So, like, what game are we playing that like he's watching me to like not mess up? It's like he already knows, and I already messed up 10 times today and it's 10 a.m. Like, I just think it's like he's banking on us messing up because that is what puts us in a position to require him. It is contingent on us failing. Our
Yeah.
failure. Sorry, let me rephrase it. Our knowing, depending, and needing God is contingent on our failure.
Wow. That is very deep.
The only thing we needed to give Jesus during the sacrifice, the resurrection, was our sin to make it worth it.
Yeah. It it's almost the parallel of two stories where you can how do the preachers put it? You can manipulate the word to fit your bidding. It's all it is it's been a power token. I mean, through all sides. People want to point fingers at one sect and one group, and this one's doing this wrong. And it's like, listen, you could twist the word as many times as you want and try to manipulate and control as best as you can. But in the end of the day, people have free choice. And I just think that, like, if you really believe in God, if you genuinely believe that, I don't think you want to be scared shitless all the time is a good way of being faithful. Like,
I also think that like the fear, if you're gonna have fear, which I do think you should, is not that he's watching you and watching you mess up. I think you should be afraid that he actually knows the contents of your heart. Like at the end of the day, if you think you're up on a pedestal telling people that their religion is wrong or what they do is wrong, and maybe that's how you think that it's supposed to go, like at the end of the day, like God is looking at your heart, not your actions. And if you just have this power play in your heart and that's what's motivating you to tell people that they're wrong or that they're sinful, like that is that depart from me, I never knew you verse. Like it's not that you told someone else that what they're doing is wrong. It's that God saw you and is like, you're only doing that so you feel better about yourself, not to glorify my name. Because if you were glorifying my name, you would love them. Like that's what we should be afraid of, is like God isn't seeing my actions, he's actually seeing like my deep core motivations and like who I truly am. That's what he's seeing.
I think that's why when we have pets, like cats or dogs,
Where's this
whatever
going?
no, I'm being serious. It teaches you a very valuable skill, which is unconditional love.
What do you mean?
Unconditional love. We as humans have a very hard time understanding of love being given with no conditions. You can have a dog that will love you from today until tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of anything. And there are people, how can it be that, God will still love you if I do these things? Right? That's
Mm.
the age old story. Well, the cat and dog kind of teaches you that lesson right there. I mean,
Are
they
you a
can
cat or
love
a
you.
dog person?
I am a cat and dog person, but like,
No, which one? Cat or dog?
I'm both. I love cats and dogs.
Okay, me too, but I'd rather have a dog because cats, like, they just run away.
I have a cat, but she's more like a dog. So I
Oh,
don't.
that is the best of both worlds.
It is. She rolls over. She sits.
That is cute. Oh, that is
Yeah.
good. Okay, hot take. Dogs in the bed, allowed or not allowed?
Oh, 100%. I mean, pit
100%
bulls
what? Allowed?
allowed, except pit bulls and huskies.
Illegal. Straight to jail.
I can't deal with pit bulls and huskies. I just can't. I've slept. Well, one of them I almost like overheated
Oh,
because huskies are like extremely warm, and I did not know
yeah.
this.
They should be
And
allowed in Florida.
I don't know why people have them as
Like, get them
pets and like
out.
I don't get it. It's like
Yeah, I see them here.
are you serious?
Oh, 1,000%. And I feel
Aren't
like
people?
they're self-regulating, and I'm like,
No, they're
I
not. They're built for cold climate. Did you not see their fur? Just put your hand on a husky for 2 minutes. I guarantee you that
yeah,
thing is going to be on fire.
yeah. I personally love pit bulls, but I love Rottweilers more.
I like pit bulls, but some owners just don't know how to take care of them, and they just get a little cray cray. And I'm just like, bro, you're 85 pounds, and
Of muscle,
yeah,
pure muscle. I agree.
yeah,
I feel like there are rules for keeping a pet. Like, and this might be hot, but A, if the dog's in the bed, to me that's like putting shoes on the bed. Like you can't take your paws off. So it's like you gotta like wash them before they come in bed or immediately wash the sheets. Like laundry day, get up in the bed. We're cuddling. Second law is that if you have a dog, you have to train it. Untrained dogs are such a nuisance.
and cats. I'm like one of those that is a very big believer. Why a lot of people have cats they just can't control? They're not trained.
I did not know you could train a cat. I'm going to be
You
honest.
can. It takes longer. That's why nobody has patience. It took me 6 months with mine, but she is fully trained.
That's wild. I have never met a trained cat.
She comes over if you call her. She usually will sit. She will usually go down from a bed if you tell her to. Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah.
So, like, same training style as dogs, though? Like Pavlovian with a treat, or is it different?
It's different because cats you have to get them in the zone. So like I have to at the beginning, like I had to like get her attention and then get the treats, like the actual physical treat box out, and then like pat her down to sit her down and then give her a treat. And then we moved on for her
Oh,
to like starting to understand that if she sits down, I'll give her a treat.
okay.
It's slower with dogs because cats don't understand what you're doing. They're trying, like, they turn their head, they're like, what are you doing? You know, like, what are you
They have
doing?
so much more free will.
They do. A lot more. A lot more.
Dogs are like, are you bringing me a toy or treat? I'll do anything for either one of those.
Anything. Like, I'll give you my belly, like, right now. I'm on the floor.
I'm not gonna lie, I feel like having a dog right now would solve 90% of my problems. Like, I don't mean to be extreme, but I do. I fostered a dog last year and it changed my life. And I miss it every day.
It makes it harder to be depressed.
Yeah. Because you have such a task every day and it loves you back so well.
Unconditionally. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's like, if you want to see that, like, love, it exists in every living thing.
No, truly. Truly. Yeah,
Like,
and it's wild like being out here in Hawaii because like you go diving and you interact. Like yesterday I was surfing and I like saw a honu, like I saw a turtle pop its head up. I'm like, you're right, I'm in your home. What's up? And then you see like monk seals and you see sharks and you see dolphins and you're like, hi, can I come in? Like this is your home that I'm interacting with. And they're so loving and they're so open. I mean, it's not like we're touching them or like petting them, but like their curiosity mirrors ours.
yeah, we're not recommending people to go out and start petting sharks.
Definitely
I
not.
No, I know what you're getting at. It's like just engulfing yourself in the environment, like just
Yeah.
seeing everything around you.
Please
Just
don't touch the wildlife.
don't touch wildlife. Like, there's jellyfish. There's like box jellyfish in Australia that will kill you.
Oh, yeah.
Kill
Or
you.
like, you know what makes me mad is like the tiny ones in Australia, like anything in Australia, end of
Will kill
sentence, but
you.
like
Yeah,
tiny animals that's like one touch from this little sea urchin will, that's my Australian accent,
I love it.
one little touch will kill you in a second. And you're like, why does this exist? I can't even see it. I wouldn't even like willingly step on, like, I didn't know. I didn't know I was stepping on death.
No, that's Australia. Down under.
That's Do you see those TikToks of people like living in Australia and there's like spiders the size of the paintings behind me? Like, no, no, that thing needs to pay rent.
Australians are interesting people. Like, if you, I worked with one bloke that was Australian, and this man just
What?
picked up a rat and threw it
No,
out.
built different.
I I I remember this like yesterday. Like, we were in the kitchen, he spotted it. He's like, "I got it." He just grabs it and just walks out of the kitchen and just throws it in the trash. Just,
The
just
trash?
the trash. They're built differently. You're right. They're built differently. They are a different being species. Like, I don't even think we can call them, like, they're just like alpha humans.
Well, they are a continent of felons. So,
Yeah.
like those are your
And
starters.
drunks.
Like the
Felons
dream,
and drunks.
the genes are strong. Like you ship off all of the hardest people in America to one continent. Yeah, like I would say that they're going to be pretty
Australia.
intense in a couple hundred years. Yeah.
I've never met like Orthodox Australian, like Orthodox, like Christian Australians. I just wonder, like, what do these people do? Like, do they go like in the middle of the wastelands?
The
Like, just,
bush?
yeah, just a bush. Just put a giant crucifix, and that's like their freaking church. I don't know. I don't know what they do.
I don't know. I spent a month in Australia and it was all Hillsongy. It was like a Hillsong vibe, but I was like in the cityest of the cities. And when I went into the bush, I was just like messing around with giant spiders and platypus. Like the stimulation never really ends there.
No, no. It's just bizarre, because we live in this little bubble called America,
Yeah.
and there is people all over the place. I I have a close friend of mine that lives out in the UK. She also grew up in an Orthodox Jewish community. and she also left. And even though she lives in the UK, like we're still friends. We've been friends for years, and it's that part of like we both left that like community, and we got something like we can relate about, and it's it's just wonderful, because like we could just talk about anything. She could talk about like religious stuff that's going on or non-religious stuff. Like it's just a free for all.
Yeah.
Um, I like that. I I wish like more people in this country had that experience too of just like being outside a little. You know,
Mm, yeah.
it really does open up your mind to different things. It really really does.
1,000%. Yeah. That's what I liked about Hawaii. That's the one thing is like I've lived in Bangkok before, and like Bangkok's insane because it's kind of like this hub where you get like every type of Asian in
You
that
don't know
country.
who are men or women. Like that is a party for me.
The most
I
beautiful
I
women are men there.
yeah, like I would go to Bangkok and I would be fine. But for a lot of people, it'd be an interesting situation.
Yeah, but like it's a different, even like the lady boys acknowledge that they're men and they're just like, but this is my identity. It's like I'm a lady boy. I'm a boy that dresses like a woman, and that's my identity. They don't fully switch, they don't re-identify in a different gender, which is a crazy concept for like the transgender communities here. Isn't that crazy? Like they acknowledge like my gender, like I have a penis, but like I'm a lady. And they like just it's almost like they there's like a line between how they express themselves and then like how they were born, like with like their penis. Whereas like here in America, there's an identity shift and like your identity pushes towards the sexual orientation. How do you feel about that?
I'm very old school. I'm one of those where back in the day, a lot of people within the trans community were proud of being trans. I've met people personally that were also proud of being trans. And it's like that term is no longer acceptable. We can't say
Trans?
trans women. We can't say trans men. It's like it has to be now men and it has to be women. I just have a hard time of like, why can't we love all of us for who we are? We can love people for being gay. We can love people for being lesbians. Why can't we be able to acknowledge trans men and trans women? Like, again, to the same idea, like in Bangkok, it's where they're not saying they're one or the other. They're ladyboys.
Yeah, they're lady boys. Like that's how they're choosing to express themselves. I think I'm confused with what you said of like they can't be called trans. Why?
Because it's being accepted that they are just like men and they're just like women.
Oh, so they're saying I'm not a trans woman, I am a woman.
But there's nothing
Oh.
wrong with being a trans woman. When you say that you're being
Oh.
a trans woman, you're basically saying that I'm proud to be a woman that has transitioned. I'm not biologically a woman, but I am a trans woman.
And I feel like I agree with you because if that trans woman just says, well, I'm a woman, it's like, no, I'm a woman and you're a trans woman. There is a
Right.
difference here.
Yeah. It doesn't make you less. It's you're a trans woman. Right. That's
There
it.
is a difference that we need to acknowledge, or else we are not speaking truthfully. We can't say one thing is something else, or else there is no difference between anything.
And it's not taking away the rights of anyone based on faith or religion or any political bias. It's accepting people for who they are and loving people for who they are regardless. It's like I don't need to know your life to be able to talk with you and have a good time. It's like we're all in this together. Like dead ass. We're all in this together.
Dead ass. I agree. Why do you
Mm.
think a hierarchy is so quickly introduced? Because I mean, obviously because there's hate. I mean, I'm not trying my hardest not to be ignorant here, but like right, why can't we just do what you just said of like I'm just going to acknowledge that you live a different life than me, and because it's different that doesn't mean you deserve any less love, but it's okay to acknowledge there's a difference. But why is there like the fight for, and because like it almost is like, is it because there's hate there has to be that hierarchy of like we even have to acknowledge like, hey, I love you and I'm not trying to take away any rights, I'm just trying to distinguish between us. Like Why do we even have to like say that prelude to that sentence?
Yeah. And you know, on the on the topic, there has been for many years there's stereotype, particularly within the gay community, of atheism and non-religious belief. But reality is that you have a large percentage of the gay community, especially here in the United States, that are religious, that do have forms of faith, and are not extremely feminine. They are masculine. And does that make them any less of who they are? It's like it's ridiculous. Just because somebody like loves the same sex but still wants to be a Christian or wants to be a religious Jew or maybe be a religious Muslim, it's like it's a crime because
It
of
is
what they
wild to me that
choose to be with somebody. Like,
like again, were you there marking off the dimensions of the earth? Do you get to determine who gets love and who doesn't?
no.
It is a wild concept that people who aren't the creator get to determine how creation is treated.
And how they're able to practice their beliefs because of their very personal decisions. It's like, well, you can't be a religious Jew because you're gay and you're having sexual intercourse with your partner. You can't be a religious Christian. I'm talking like I don't even know which groups are ever. I don't know. There was a whole thing like someone was explaining with me like Catholics are now accepting of gays. I don't even know. It's confusing. It's really confusing.
It
But
touches
like,
back to like so many things you said before of like, A, we're all on our own journey. We're all going to reconnect with our creator in the way that works for us, in the founding beliefs that we've grounded ourselves in. Like in the Christian beliefs, you are interacting with God in the Christian way, in the way that works for you. I do think that there are like, I don't know, I don't want to say like there are rules we have to follow of like we cannot say like, yeah, he's cool if I do this. It's like you are going to come to God in your own way. And I'm not going to tell you how to do that because that is your journey and not mine. We're also called to know God and love others. When you start playing God and telling people what they can and can't do, like I've got a whole list of other things you could also do if you're going to play God. If you want to play God, pop off. But that's going to come with everything else that it comes with playing God. You're going to decipher judgment. You're going to mark off the dimensions of the earth. You know, when's the end of the world going to be? Would love to know this agenda for that. Like, if you're going to play God, play God. But you don't get to pick and choose.
yeah, it's the ideology of even the word abomination. It's the word abomination, meaning that it's an abomination and disgrace in front of God. It's where if you genuinely believe in that ideology of God, why is there orphans? Why are there kids that don't have any homes? Maybe, maybe if you believe in a higher power, you believe in God. Maybe the reason why these people are here is to raise and take care of those children that don't have homes. You know, there's so many different aspects that we can't see on like the smallest scale. Like, you take bees, for example. They don't pollinate. We don't have vegetation. Very simple. It's like every single thing has its purpose, its plan, whatever the case may be. It's like, don't mess with the blueprints. It's like, you're not the architect, you're not the software designer. Stop touching my keyboard. You know? Stop it. Like, this is off limits.
Yeah. I just feel like if anybody feels even confused, which like has been like my saving grace of like I'm in my walk with God. And if you feel like you don't agree with my walk with God, you should go to God and go to him about it. Everything we have is from the Lord. And if you're like, God, this doesn't make sense to me. God, I don't get it. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. Lay your like what is it? It's Job 5:8 and 9. It's like if I were you, I'd lay your issues before the Lord and see what he does because he's gonna do something unfathomable. Like that's not, word for word Eliphaz, but like if you're confused, just go to God about it. Cause like he created you. Like he has answers for you. Just seek him. Kind of like what I was saying before of like you are going to sin. That's like the one guarantee. But what do you do after you sin? Do you go back to sin? Do you go back to shame? Do you go back to guilt? Or do you go to God? And you're like, hey, God, I did the thing you knew I'd do. What do I do next? And that is where like that sanctification, that is where like God works when you give him that chance to. So even all these questions of like, well, who's right and who's wrong and what's an abomination and why are there orphans and why are there suffering? It's like, we could talk all day about it. We're professional yappers. But if we want answers, I would go to the creator about it and I would just take it up with him because he's going to provide answers in unfathomable ways.
Yeah. I mean, the hotline right now is a little busy because a lot of people are calling, but you could try back a little later.
Leave a message for sure.
Yeah.
They usually get back to like, I've waited 5 years once, so
It's for me, a lot of my spiritual journey, like I was in Israel for a few years to like kind of connect to my roots. I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of few psychedelics along the way, and you just you think differently. You
yeah.
don't you worry less. You're still anxious and get down at times, but you start to realize that if you set yourself up and know what's right, like you said, like you know what's right in your heart, you know where and what you're supposed to be doing, which, to be honest, I think we all kind of know what our purpose is deep down. We just can't, we're too, we have too much going on to be able to think about it. That's the
Dave,
issue.
Dave, if you know my purpose, I would love to know. Please tell me.
No, but you get what I'm saying is like we have so much that is going on around us on a day-to-day basis from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep. We're How do we even have time to think about something like that? That's what I'm trying to get at is we know what our purpose is, but we're so busy doing everything else that we don't have any time or thought to put into that. And I think that what that teaches us is that we over time gravitate towards that without consciously thinking about it. A lot of the decisions and things that we make is coming from that purpose. What we
What do you,
gravitate towards.
what is your purpose, Dave?
I don't know yet. Still figuring that out.
I thought we kind of knew deep down.
We know deep down, but listen, you know, I don't
So
think
deep
there's enough. I don't
down,
think there's enough weed in here for me to get deep down enough. Like,
that's why I think the simplicity of like know God, love others. That's my purpose, and whatever falls within that giant net is my purpose. And that's going to look different for you than it is for me.
it's like that bungee cord ride at the amusement park. They throw you. You like drop 50 feet. You're like, Jesus, I'm gonna die. But there's a net, and there's a string that's attached to you. You're
Yeah,
okay.
you'll get launched, and we'll see where you
Yeah,
land. Have you
yeah,
actually
you'll
ever done one
land.
of those?
I've chickened out too many times.
Dude, I would sign up today, but unfortunately, there's not one in front of me. I've always wanted to do that.
I have a fear of
Always.
heights. That's my problem.
Oh, yeah, you should work on that.
I should. I mean, I've hiked. I've been able to like do certain things that I haven't been able to do before.
That's good. Is it
But
like a phobia, or do you think it's just like exposure therapy? Like if you did rock climbing, you'd eventually get over it.
I think it has to do with my eyes because two reasons I wear glasses is I'm farsighted and my eyes don't focus. So when I'm like too high and I'm looking down, it's like does that. It starts like palpitating. So I can't like focus 100% on like what I'm looking at and it kind of like freaks me out.
Oh yeah, that would definitely freak me out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what if you did things like rock climbing helped me because
I've done
I'm
rock
nearsighted?
climbing.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. How'd you feel like coming down from the top?
It was rough.
It is rough.
It's rough.
It's very rough.
But it's exhilarating. Like as you keep gunning up there, like it gets harder and harder because you're tired and you're sweating and you just keep pushing.
And then you look down, you're like, ah! Shouldn't have looked down.
Shouldn't have looked down.
Shouldn't have looked
Fuck.
down. But then you get to the top and you have to fully let go and lean back. And that's the only way to get down. I've done a couple rock climbings, like top roping, and I've been like 150 feet in the air. And I'm like, the only thing standing between me and death is like this harness and like one little metal clip and a rope, and then I'm dead. But what about like skydiving where you don't need to focus on the ground because you're just falling? Like, would you do that?
Is a sedative okay to take before?
But then you would remember it.
I know. Ugh. It's,
When
you know what, look, like I've made a lot of accomplishments, and I'm sure you have too. It's just like we do have like those obstacles that are hard to get over,
yeah,
you know? Like I'm sure one day down the line, like I'll be able to do it. It's just and it's like hilarious. I live in a place where like they do all this shit. Like it's Florida, bro. You know, like they do skydiving and bungee jumping and alligator rallying and all that, and mud sliding.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm in a really
yeah.
crazy part of. I think like we're both in like really bizarre places in this country. Like you're in paradise, like in the
You're also
middle
in
of the
paradise.
ocean. Yeah.
I'm in the middle of nowhere. Out ya. Just using my Wi-Fi to connect with you. It's awesome though. You When I moved out here, so many people gave me advice. They're like, you're gonna get island fever and it's too expensive and you're gonna miss home. And it's just wild because when you live in such a beautiful place, like my vacation is going home to Arizona and visiting family, and my free time is doing the most amazing things. And I never really get island fever because I've never lived in a place where people travel so much. Like I lived in Arizona for like 4 years before this, and people just like never left. Like maybe they'd go to Phoenix or LA, but like here I can never see my friends because they're always in Japan or they're on another island or they're in New Zealand. Like, you don't really get island fever because it's like too fun. And also, like, every time I go on vacation and leave, all I want to do is come home. Like, I went to Italy last year for 2 weeks. I'm like, I just can't wait to go back home. Like, I just want to,
That is a
like,
long ass flight.
30 hours. Girl,
It's
I should have been on the
Italy.
moon.
You get the lasagna. You get the meatballs. You get the Italiana man. It's a wonderful. It's Italiano. Ah, I
Yes.
love it. I love Italy. Oh, when I was
Love
in Rome,
it.
I just did men's shopping the whole time I was there. It was wonderful. But I could imagine that too, like just that yearning of wanting to be home. It's
Yeah,
just
like I just want my bed. I want my poke bowl. I want to be in my ocean. But I'm in the arguably the most beautiful place I could ever imagine, which is Italy. And I'm like, I just want to be home in Hawaii. Like that's the worst part of living here is like you never really want to leave.
no, I mean that's kind of it's kind of what happens to people here in Florida. It's kind of hilarious because like people down here kind of remind me of people like the community that I grew up in with. You never leave. You just grow old, watch your grandkids grow up, and then you die there. you know?
Growing up is so beautiful. Like creating a nest and creating a
I know.
community and creating your own home. Like that is a beautiful part of life. That is like probably one of those beautiful expressions of free will.
But there's not that many I don't know, like there's not that many places in this country that you can do those kind of things anymore. But I feel like more and more now people are starting to realize like there's a lot of benefits of moving out to like there's a lot of like really great states that have a lot of great places to like live out like North Carolina, you got
Hmm.
Texas, got
Hmm.
people that are moving out to like Nebraska. I don't recommend that, but Nebraska could be nice sometimes. It's
Absolutely.
cold.
I
It's
don't think
cold
my
out.
nest will be in Hawaii, if I'm going to be honest. I think my nest will be close to my family on the mainland, probably like Georgia, probably like Arizona, like a
Georgia's
place where you could,
nice.
just like a place where you can like buy land. Like this is a fun place to live when you're so young, but like
Can't
I'm
buy
not
land.
Hawaiian. Yeah, you can't buy land. Like maybe the big island, but like unless I leave this island like pregnant and married, like like my nest will be somewhere else. But like I have created a beautiful community here, but like I said, like people are coming and going all the time.
That's why like I even though I lived like down here primarily like taking care of family, but one of the things that like gravitated like with Texas was land. I grew up in the country and there's just I need nature. I need to like wake up and all I see is trees and birds.
I do not want to hear the word KPI for the rest of my life. I just want to like gather water from my creek and like water my garden with it and then like drink wine topless in my backyard. Like that's the end goal.
That is a dream. And you have like little pond and you have koi fish in there.
Oh yeah. See, I want a guard goose. I want a barn cat to get rid of the rats and I want a guard goose
Goose.
and I want an indoor Rottweiler that just like rides shotgun in my Bronco. Like I have a whole vision.
Rottweilers are some of the cutest. Like, I've had my share experience with Rottweilers. Like, people are like, oh my God, they're so vicious and they're mean. And one of the Rottweilers I remember, like, I bumped into was this, like, girl, and she was just, like, adorable. And all she didn't want to do was just cuddle. And I was just like, oh my God, can I play with her all day? Like,
And they're units.
they're, believe it or not, they're more gentle than pit bulls. Like Rottweilers kind of understand that they're heavy, kind of don't, but they don't like bang at you like ow,
Oh my
ow, like
gosh.
they.
Pit
Oh,
bulls, they just run with their mouth open. You're like, which part of my body is about to be in your mouth? It's like, ah. Yeah. Yeah. Rottweilers are so cute, but they do growl in that really scary way with their teeth. That's honestly the worst part for me.
I think that like dogs are they're kind of fascinating because like they're not like any other creature. Like they're so like attuned to their owner, like dead as like there are owners that they'll have some of the sweetest dogs, and I kind of already know that these are some of like the sweetest people, and they
Hmm.
generally are. You know, when
Hmm.
you come to those homes and like the dog is kind of like growling and kind of vicious, you know, they're
Mm.
like kind of playing, they're being nice. I'm like, I, I
You
don't
are
know if
reflect like I know more about you now that I know your dog.
yeah,
Yeah, that's fair. That's super fair. That's why you train them.
yeah.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about dog names. If I had a dog, and I think like no matter what, male, female, it's gonna be homeboy or homegirl. That's it. Depends on the gender, obviously, but
I got high and I was with a bunch of my girl pals and they were like driving me crazy to give her a girl name. I was high as shit and I'm like eating a Twix bar. I'm naming her Twix. And they're like, no, it's not girly. I'm like, her name's Twix. Like, no. How about Twixie? And I'm like, fine, Twixie. Her name's Twix. I named her after a freaking candy bar that was in my mouth while I was like salivating. You know, like I don't care. Like that's her name.
At your
You know?
most stimulated, you wanted a Twix bar. How more
Yeah.
emblematic of your unconditional love for your pet?
There you go. I
Like
mean,
when you could want anything, when everything sounds delicious, you chose Twix.
even though she's way more expensive than a Twix bar. But yes,
Your cat?
of course. You know how expensive cats are? Like, do you think they clean up after themselves? No.
I have never owned a cat, but I've lived with a cat, so I
They're
don't
dirty.
know.
They're dirty. Cats are not clean. I don't know
I
where this whole myth came. They're not clean.
I agree with you. Um, I also like don't hate me, but I am not a fan of cats on the counter. That like honestly freaks me out quite a bit. I'm so scared. Do you hate me?
No, no, I agree with you. I just sometimes she goes places and I'm just like, I don't think even the Lord wants you to be there. You know, like I'm trying to enjoy myself in the bathroom and I'm like, girl, what you doing in here? Out. You know, I could be showering and it's like a little head pops in and I'm like, hey,
Girl.
privacy, please?
Yeah, it's for me,
No.
it's the counters. It's the counters. I don't
I
want
got
cat hair in my ground beef. I'm trying to meet my protein intake and I don't need extra hairs in it.
oh my God. Cassie, I forgot to ask you because you mentioned this earlier about your podcast. What is the name of your
What's up?
podcast?
Biblically speaking.
Biblically speaking. And you how do you do your episodes? Do you do like series? Do you just publish every week, every 2 weeks?
It's weekly. I bring on a guest. It's interview style, and so like for example, I just had a guy on who I just like find them at universities, and I'm like, hey, you're a professor. Like the one credential to come on my show is you have to have a PhD because I've been going to church my whole life and I have questions, so like I can't do pastors. I've had a couple pastors, but it was
You
like
need
worth it.
somebody that has like some educational background. Uh, Not only just for the degree, a lot of those people have the brain where they could just
Yeah.
spew out,
Yeah.
like this person, da da da, I quote da da da, and they just
Yep.
immediately.
Like their job is to teach, not to do an altar call, which was like the point. So they come on and I like we have a call ahead of time and I send the notes ahead of time and I'm just like this guy just came on. He's like, I can do open theism. Nobody agrees with me. You're gonna catch flack for it. And so I send the questions, we have the conversation. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever navigated because I was like so confused, like on live air, like still trying to figure out what he's saying, just like reacting. Cause like I don't do research. I don't like come into these conversations
Neither
prepared
do I.
because
I want to
well,
get
I
to
want
know you. Like
well, I
that's the
also
whole
want to react
idea.
authentically. Like, I want to
Yeah.
be my listeners of like, wait, I don't know what that means either. Cause I didn't, most listeners don't read research papers. I'm not going to read a research paper. I'm not going to watch background. Like, you explained biblical timelines to me like I'm dumb, and I'll clarify because that's probably like what my listeners are
Like
doing.
we did
Yeah.
earlier. Like I kind of went back and forth, kind of breaking
Yeah.
down. Sometimes you just gotta do that stuff. It's like we're not
Yeah.
all freaking math whiz and geniuses. You know?
Got to break it down. Got to
Yeah,
break it
gotta break it
down.
down.
So they come on weekly and, yeah, it's like an hour and we just like chit chat and that's it. I put it on YouTube, I put it on Spotify, and then I put it on Instagram. And
Okay.
that's like it's just like clips of it. And
Yeah.
then I'm trying to do more like I'm trying to like read the analytics, see what people like, make more videos of that because like an hour is kind of a long time. So I try to like make it more consumable. I like do a weekly newsletter that like recaps it. I do like weekly Bible studies on that topic. So I'm like trying to serve Cass 5 years ago who needed this. Like, what does she need? Let's give her that.
Yeah. I think very much what podcasting is what you make of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you've summed it up and done it pretty beautifully. You've put your own spin on it.
Thanks.
PhDs aside, it's getting a real perspective. It's like, you're sitting there as like the viewer, because obviously, like, we're talking and nobody can talk back to us and tell us like but in many ways, we get to be that viewer that's asking those questions, and like
Yeah.
getting into the mind to try to like break things down. Because again, I had the same problem too when I left. Like, I was surrounded by people telling me what the truth is and what isn't. And I'm like, I want to talk to some experts about this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think,
Thank you.
especially doing that weekly and you got a bunch of cool people coming on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Literally just had a guy on that was talking about open theism. That'll probably come out in 2 weeks. And the next week
oh,
is his
yes.
friend who disagrees with him.
Oh, wow.
And then I have another, so it's like both perspectives. And like,
Yeah,
I
I
just
like
booked
that.
another guy who's like also doesn't agree with open theism. And it's like, as Christians, we're expected to like know the God that we gave our life to. And yet we can't answer these questions. And even every scholar that I brought on, like Hugh Ross, astrophysicist, he's an older theorist. He thinks that the 7 days were epochs of time. Then I have other people, they believe it's a young earth. And like, it's okay that they disagree. Like, our God is unfathomable. Imagine if one person on earth fathomed God. That would make him God. And it wouldn't make our God God if he was fathomable. So, like, it's really wonderful to have all these, like, beautiful, intellectual, like, open, well informed conversations that most people were like, oh, yeah, I didn't even know what a sanctification gap was. And I'm like, me neither, And now, like, I know my God better because, like, I don't know, I really try to dumb it down because I'm dumb. So if I can understand it, someone else can. And like, I mean that with love. I'm not like self-deprecating here. Like,
No, for sure.
I'm just being real with like my intellect level compared to theirs. Like it's lower. It's okay.
What what's your social media handle?
So Instagram, I'm on a religiously like toxic amount of time. So if you
Biblically
want to talk to me,
speaking.
it's biblically speaking. It's this is biblically speaking on Instagram, and then biblically speaking on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and then if you just want to like, if you don't even remember anything from today, go to my website because that's where everything is. It's called bibspeak.com. And I've got like merch that I don't promote. So if you want merch that no one has in the world, you can buy it there. I have like free guides. So it's like, hey,
Ooh.
here's a verse that we were all like, here's a verse that like everyone thinks they know, like Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. What does that verse mean? We think it means I'm Christian, I'm locked and loaded with a cool plan, and I'll be prosperous. That's not what it means. And so it's like 7 verses like that, where it's like the verse, what we think it means, and then a scholar clarifies what it really means. So yeah, that's it. And then I've got guides like based on, because I've talked with scholars about like homosexuality and transgenderism and religious trauma. So it's like based on the scholars, how do we as Christians navigate what it says about those in the most loving, well-informed ways? I
Yeah.
like make summary guides so you don't have to listen to the episode. So yeah, bibspeak.com is like home base for everything.
I'm going to leave a link in the description box below, so make it
Cool.
easier, and
Thanks.
as well as your social media handle.
Love it.
Cassian, I have to say, like, this conversation went a lot of different places, but you definitely have that influence where, with what you've been doing with your podcast and the people that you've been speaking with, it, again, has that open-minded perspective where we can cover all kinds of avenues and be able to discuss all sorts of things regarding religion and faith. It's like we're all here on this planet together. And if you want to close your door to one avenue, that's fine. But I like to believe that we should open our minds and ears to all sorts of things. So yeah.
Dave, this was really fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. Listen, Cassian, thank you so much. And to all of you that are listening, if you want to check out more of the podcast, you can find us everywhere and anywhere at Lost in the Groove Pod. So with that, catch you on the next one. Peace out.
Peace out.